Hi guys, my name's Pocket and welcome to episode 2 of League 101. This is my video series focused on newer and emerging metas and also champions that have rising play rates. Today we're going to be looking at one of my favourite champions right now, and that's Sett support. Sett is a new champion, and though he's intended to be a top laner or a jungler, he's been seeing a significant amount of play and support recently. I think he's one of the most powerful solo queue supports right now, but all too often I see people trying to play him like a top laner, and that just doesn't work as support. When he's played right though, he's a fantastic champion to carry on, especially in the lower elos, and this video is going to show you exactly how to play him, how to avoid the common mistakes, and get you right on your way to climbing with him. Now, being a 101 guide, I'm going to go from the absolute basics all the way to the little tips and tricks that are going to turn you from a Sett player into a Sett master. Remember, you can use the timestamps in the video description if you need to navigate to something specific, and let's get started. First up is Sett's passive. Well, actually it's passives, because it wouldn't be a 2020 champ without two of them. Firstly, Sett gains health regen based on percentage missing health. This scales with level at 1, 6, 11 and 16, or you can think of it as when you get an ult level up. It caps out at 95% missing health, where he gains between 4.75 bonus health regeneration at level 1 and a massive 38 bonus health regeneration at level 16. Secondly, Sett has heavy hands. This means that he alternates between his left and his right fist as he punches the enemy with his auto attacks. He always starts with a left punch, and then his right punch comes out 8 times faster. It deals bonus damage that scales with level and attack damage, while also gaining 50 range. Some people can pick this passive up easily just by hearing it, others need to jump in the practice tool, but I promise you'll understand it really easily if you get on Sett and just have a go. Now for his actual abilities. Sett's Q is Knuckle Down. Once activated, Sett gains 30% movement speed towards enemy champions. This does not work against minions, monsters or towers, only champions, and this is important to note. It empowers his next 2 basic attacks, and they deal bonus physical damage that scale with Sett's AD and with the target's maximum health. It's important to note that this ability not only resets Sett's basic attack timer, but it resets the cadence of his punches, so his first punch after pressing Q will always be a left punch. This can be used in a few places, and we'll see that later on. Sett's W is the Haymaker. This allows Sett to passively store post-mitigation damage as grit. When activated, Sett uses all the grit to shield himself and then blast the area in front of him with physical damage. Targets that are right in the center of this blast actually take true damage instead. This is Sett's most important ability, and you'll be maxing W first every game. Sett's E is aptly named the Facebreaker. This ability has Sett grab everything on either side of him and drag them into each other. He deals physical damage that scales with AD and slows them by 50% for half a second. If he successfully manages to drag at least one enemy on each side, then they'll be stunned for 1 second. Now Sett can drag minions, he can drag monsters, he can drag buffs, he can drag champions, but he cannot drag structures or epic monsters like Dragon or Baron. This is Sett's main form of hard CC, and it's the ability that you'll level first in most games. It's also the ability that you'll be maxing after W. It's an important ability to master on Sett because it's quite unique, and it's a different type of mechanical skill, and it requires a different type of positioning to most other supports. I did find, however, that it wasn't too difficult to transfer my mechanical skill from other champions onto this ability. I just kind of had to get used to it. I think this is probably going to be the same for you, and I really suggest just getting in there and trying it out. Finally, Sett's ult. This is the showstopper. It's a 1.5 second suppression, it's a dash, it gives Sett unstoppability, and he attaches to the enemy, like a big, cuddly, absolutely terrifying Yumi. He chokeslams them into the ground, dealing damage to everybody in the area, and it scales with the primary target's bonus health. Now be aware, this dash can jump over walls, but it will stop early if it reaches a wall that you're unable to dash through. This can open up some great plays on Sett, but also some great ways to accidentally isolate yourself with a target that you don't want to be alone with. You need to use caution and position wisely, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Now let's talk a little bit about why Sett works as a support. After all, he's meant to be a top laner or maybe even a jungler, but he's not really meant to be a support. so I want to go over exactly how he's meant to be used and what makes him so good in this role. Well, first up is just his kit. He's got quite a few things that make him really suited to support straight off the bat. Firstly, he's got good tankiness and he's got good early game fighting strength. This makes him really good into certain matchups, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. Secondly, he has great lane sustain, at least for himself. His passive allows him to survive those pokey, annoying matchups like Soraka or Nami, who can often be quite harassing and quite annoying to melee matchups like Sett, but he doesn't really have a problem with them. And of course, he has hard CC with both his E and his R, so he's bringing that utility really necessary to work on a duo lane where you're relying on somebody else for the damage. Also, his W makes him a fantastic tower diver. He's probably the best level 2 tower diver in the game right now, and when combined with an ADC that can burst a lot of damage while Sett tanks the tower, you can do some really cool things right at level 2. Because of this solid kit, he doesn't need items to be relevant, which yet again really helps his early game. It also synergizes super well with the fact that supports earn low gold, and the fact that he can continue to be relevant despite not earning a super high amount of gold is really good. That being said, he does drop off in a support build into the mid and late game compared to say a top laner build, and this is a really important thing to note because you really need to understand that you're not a top laner and your playstyle into the mid and late game will not be like a top laner. So when should we be picking Sett? Well, firstly, Sett is not the safest first pick in the world. He gets pretty hard countered by very long range mage matchups like Brand or Xerath because he can't really engage them and they don't want to engage him. So all of the fighting that Sett wants to be doing in the early game isn't happening, and he can't really make it happen a lot of the time. Also, even taking into account his passive and the health regeneration from the support item, he really can't engage them a lot of the time because they've done such sustained and consistent poke damage that he's constantly low HP and he really doesn't even want to take a fight. This is really awful matchup on Sett a lot of the time, and it's something that you should really consider if they've picked this kind of support. Secondly, he can be countered by champs like Taric and Braum because they want to be engaged on, much like Sett, but they do a bit of a better job at it. Now, they can't engage Sett either, but really they scale much better into the late game, especially Taric, and these are pretty hard matchups for Sett as well. If they have squishy champions though, such as Soraka or Nami, you can do a lot of Sett. He's one of my favourite engagers in this scenario because they can't really do enough sustained poke like a Xerath or a Brand could in order to take him out of the game. He's also great into hard engage itself. Blitzcrank, Leona, Nautilus, if they Q you, they're already doing your job for you. They're basically engaging for you, because once you're on top of them, you can do more. I find he also works great into mobile champs like Ezreal. Ezreal can be a really slippery little fella at the best of times, but he suffers against Sett's suppression, and Sett's ability to control the direction of the fight and lead Ezreal to where Sett wants him to be. Now, Sett's biggest issue with his kit is his lack of an innate engage. For this reason, the combination of Hex Slash, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, and his Q is what makes Sett truly viable on bot lane in my opinion, and it's something that you want to take in 100% of games. This gives Sett a solid and reliable engage mechanic, and once Sett gets onto the enemy, he's a really solid champion that can do a lot. However, this form of engage can be pretty limiting, and that leads us on to our next section, which is runes. So this combination of Hex Splash and Nimbus Cloak is a great engage, but its limitations come from the fact that it requires Sett to have both sorcery and inspiration runes. If he doesn't have this, then he doesn't have the reliable engage, and he can't truly shine as a support. This is categorically the most common mistake I see on Sett support players. I see them taking Aftershock, Hail of Blades, or Conqueror, and it all zones him out of being able to use Hex Slash Nimbus Cloak combo by taking different rune trees. Conqueror and Hail of Blades can be great on top lane, but they just can't be used as support. Now, rather than just give you a rune page and say, play this to become a challenger Sett player, I'm going to take a look at both the sorcery and the inspiration tree so you can really understand exactly what works with Sett, why it works with Sett, and when you should be taking it. First up is sorcery. This opens up Aerie, Arcane Comet, and Phase Rush. Now Aerie doesn't make sense because it's aimed at enchanters, and Comet similarly is aimed at pokey mages, so this isn't useful either. Phase Rush, however, gives you a nice speed boost and a slow resistance. When you attack the enemy 3 times, it procs, and it's a great choice on Sett. Like I said, when Sett gets onto an ADC, he doesn't want to let go, and Phase Rush can help him stay on top of them and deal a pretty significant amount of damage. On the other hand, if Sett decides he does want to let go, you can use it to get out quickly, avoiding damage and winning the trade. Of course, this gives us access to Nimbus Cloak and Celerity for his engage, which we'll select next. I won't bother going over the other runes. Just know that Nimbus Cloak and Celerity are staples for Sett's engage with Flash and Hex Flash, so you should be taking them 100% of the time. Finally, we're going to select Water Walking. This helps with Sett's roams, something we're going to go into detail about soon, while also giving him better trading and escape in the river. You don't want Scorch because it's a more poke focused rune with that low 10-second cooldown, which means Sett can't proc it as much as it's meant to be, and we don't want Gathering Storm because, like I said, Sett falls off pretty hard and you don't want to be playing around a scaling AD build. Now on the second tree, of course, we're going Inspiration, where we'll take Hex Flash. The next runes will either be Futures Market, Approach Velocity, Cosmic Insight, or Minion Dematerializer. First up is Futures Market. This is my favourite secondary rune for Sett because even though he's a support, he buys quite a few non-support items with bad build paths. Futures Market can help him keep up and help him stay relevant by hitting power spikes earlier and really making him shine. Secondly is Cosmic Insight. Cooldown management is important on Sett, and the extra 5% can really help you, especially early on. In my opinion though, I think Futures Market is better. It's often the better play, but if you're very confident in your ability to control your lane and really set the pace of the game so that you don't need Futures Market to ensure that you have good backs, then this can be a nice offensive option. Next is Approach Velocity. This is not really useful in most cases, but it can be fantastic in certain synergies. The recent changes to this rune means that you now gain speed to enemies impaired by your allies. So if you have Ashe ADC or Glacial Augment Senna, then you can gain 7.5% bonus movement speed towards them, which is great with Sett's engage style of just running face first into the enemy. Lastly is Minion Dematerializer. Now, I wouldn't suggest taking this if you're low elo, because you're probably not going to be able to use it to its full extent, but if you're confident in your ability to control the wave without your ADC, this can really help out. And like I said, the other runes other than Hex Flash are not too big of a power spike for Sett, so if you really like playing around Minion Dematerializer, then this could be for you. Cookies and Time Warp Tonic are just unnecessary in my opinion due to Sett's great health regen, and when you combine them with the support's health regen, they just really don't make any sense. Lastly, for the sub-runes, we'll take Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and a defensive choice to suit. I take these every game without exception, as you really want to max out the damage that you're doing, but the bonus health as a scaling rune doesn't really help you as much in the early game. Now for the Inspiration tree. I'm going to keep this a lot shorter because we've already gone over most of these runes. So to start, there's Glacial Augment. This is not worth it on a melee support like Sett, and Unsealed Spellbook isn't worth it on any support in my opinion, because you don't have the independence to really use it to its full extent. This means that we're going to go for Omnistone. This is a risky rune based largely on chance. There is some smart selection, but you're going to be having to play around random rolls. However, it works great on Sett, as he can use almost every single rune option in a unique and useful way. It's extremely fun build, and it's my most used keystone on Sett. So we're going to start by obviously taking Hex Flash, Futures Market, and then either Cosmic Insight or Approach Velocity. Like I said, you can choose this based on the matchup. Secondly, of course, we're going to take Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, and there's your page. So now we have two great rune pages on Sett, but how do we choose between them? Well, of course, the most important thing to consider is the enemy. If the enemy has a very squishy or immobile champion, like enchanters or mages, then I like to take Omnistone. This is because you usually want to work around a full engage playstyle, aiming to kill them when you get on top of them. This means access to high damage keystones like Hail of Blades and Electrocute, among others of course, is a great synergy, and it can give you a great opportunity to start something. If the enemy is heavily mobile though, or they have good disengage such as Alistar, Ezreal or Janna, then you'll probably want Phase Rush. This is because you're more likely to take trades, and with Phase Rush giving you a nice out, you'll hopefully come out on top more often. Phase Rush Sett is actually my favourite counter to Ezreal right now. He's in a very strong position in solo queue, and if I can proc Phase Rush before he uses his E, then I can run him down. If you manage to get on top of an Ezreal without his E, like I said earlier, you're gonna delete him. Phase Rush actually has a 3% higher win rate than Omnistone versus Ezreal, so it's a great example of why you need to be thinking about your rune choice very carefully. Also, if the enemy has a lot of slows, like Senna, Ashe, or Janna, the slow resistance from Phase Rush can be a lifesaver. So I know this has been a bit long, but hopefully you've got a great understanding of Sett's runes now, and you'll be able to pick the right runes for the right matchups at the right time. Now for items. Your starting items will always be steel shoulder guards. They give great health regen to combine with Sett's passive, and of course it means you can CS to earn gold rather than have to poke the enemy. You'll take 2 health potions and a warding trinket as well, and once you finish, or you're close to finishing your support item, make sure you grab Oracle Lens for vision control. For boots, you'll want Boots of Swiftness. These not only give slow resistance, but often overlooked by some players, they actually give an extra 10 movement speed over the other standard boots. Unlike mobility boots though, this movement speed persists in combat, which makes them great on Sett. They synergize fantastically with Phase Rush for huge slow resistance, and consistent movement speed advantages in all of his fights. Slows kill Sett because his engage is mainly based on running towards the enemy, and he doesn't have an inherent gap close. If the enemy has an AP carry and an AP mage support and an AP jungler, then maybe you'll want to take magic resist boots, but this will be an extremely tough matchup for Sett anyway, and it's probably not something you're going to want to pick Sett into. His core build is Deadman's Plate. It's the only full item that I will always build on Sett. The movement speed is great with Celerity, Nimbus Cloak, and Swiftness boots, and his overall playstyle really helps him roam and gank once he's got Deadman's Plate. The extra damage and the on-hit slow are not to be ignored, and the large health bonus goes great with his W, so it's really just a great item on him, and none of the stats are being wasted. The only downside to Deadman's Plate is that's a pretty shoddy build path. You have to gain 1,100 gold on Sett to get this one item spike. That's pretty tough on a support, especially once you finish your support item and your gold income drops off massively. But with the use of Futures Market, it can really help Sett out here, and you're more likely to be able to build it very quickly. After Deadman's Plate, you have 3 options: tank, support, or damage. I don't believe damage is worth it on Sett support at all. Items like Blade of the Rune King, Trinity, Death Stance, and Black Cleaver are all really expensive, and you're never going to get ahead as a support like this. No matter how much damage you're doing, once you finish your support item, your gold income drops off a cliff, and you can't CS to get gold, so you're not going to be able to keep up with a build like this anymore. I find that this is a great way to lose a lead because you get cocky, you think, I'll go full damage, and then you just can't keep up with items, and the enemy outscales you. Now, the most common build on Sett support is the tank build. It makes him a strong presence in teamfights, and it synergizes really well with his kit overall. It's a very safe build, and it's especially good into enemy team comps that are heavily biased to one type of damage for pretty obvious reasons. The items in the tank build include Gargoyle Stoneplate, which is great if they have mixed damage, Thornmail, which can help you shut down that heavy sustain, especially in solo queue and in the lower relos, where your team is going to refuse to buy anti-heals because they're tunnel visioned on one item. Thornmail can make a huge difference. Then there's Randuin's. It's great into crit heavy ADCs and crit heavy top laners as well, such as Yasuo and Tryndamere. Then there's Adaptive Helm. This is great for ability spamming mages. And then there's of course Spirit Visage. Now, because you're going to be Omnistone or Phase Rush on Sett, Spirit Visage is not as good because it only affects healing, not shielding, and you're not going to be getting that much innate sustain due to not having any runes that give you sustain and not wanting to build Blade or Death Stance. Spirit Visage, however, does synergize pretty well with Knight's Vow, which leads us on to the next topic. This is of course the support build for Sett. I think this is a heavily underrated build, and is one that I think can be very powerful in solo queue, especially when the game's going a bit longer. It really helps you stay relevant and keep up with what's happening. The first benefit to this is that you're buying actual support items, and these items are ridiculously cheap. They offer great base stats, and if you won lane and got an ADC ahead, then they can really help you maintain that lead because they can provide great peel or extra damage for your ADC. First up is Knight's Vow. This is the most common support item for Sett, and it works great with a fed ADC as it gives innate peel, and it really synergizes well with Sett's love of incoming damage and then turning it into massive damage outwards. It only costs 2,200 gold, and it's relatively easy to buy with a pretty good build path. It works great into full AD comps for obvious reasons, and it's just a really fantastic item on Sett. Next, and what I truly believe is the most underrated item on Sett, is Zeke's Convergence. It's just 2,250 gold, but it gives 90 defensive base stats, 60 armor and 30 AP, as well as having a fantastic passive for your ADC that really works well with Sett's kit. Now of course, there is a setback of this build. It's a pretty big one as well. The problem with the support items on a character like Sett is that they rarely give you health. As we've said, Sett's W scales with HP because the more damage he can take, the more damage he can do. By not building health, you do handicap your own ability to do damage, and of course you handicap your survivability a little as well. This is the biggest benefit of the tank build over the support build, but I think in a lot of team comps, especially when you have a very fed ADC, the support build will always be better because we're not going to be relying on our own damage to play Sett as a support, we're going to be relying on our team. As usual, it's going to be up to you to itemize according to how the game's going. If you want to start tank because your ADC hasn't done very well, but then suddenly they're starting to snowball and they're starting to get fed, maybe you can move on to Knight's Vow or Zeke's to really help them out. It's okay to itemize on the fly like this, and it's something that I suggest with every champion. So now we're going to do a few little tips and tricks to really help you master Sett on support. These will be useful whether you're coming from top lane and you want to know how to bring him into the bot lane, or even if you're just brand new to Sett as a champion and you want to know exactly how to use him right. Number one is using Q on wards. Now this is a super useful trick, and for the support mains out there who've already played Leona, it works pretty much the same as her. You auto the ward once and then you press Q and then you'll do 2 more because it resets your punch timer, which means that you do 3 autos really quickly. This is a great trick, like I said, and it means that you don't need an oracle lens or a control ward to control vision if you can get to the ward quick enough. You've just got to be careful not to press Q too quickly because you can reset your auto attack before you actually do your first auto. That'll delay your punch and then the ward will survive. Number 2 is using your Q in fights. Now, unlike with the wards where you want to do free punches really quickly to get those free health bars down, in fights it's more about your sustained DPS. This means that instead of resetting it after your left punch, you'll reset it after your right punch. This means that you do 4 hits really quickly and you get those 2 empowered hits after already doing 2 normal hits. Again, this can sound a little complicated, but you'll get used to it super quickly and it'll just become second nature after a while. Now number 3 is that you don't have to fight. Sett is super flashy and he's super rewarding, and it can feel really good to constantly go in and really dominate your lane. It can become a problem sometimes though, because you feel too obligated to take every engage that you possibly can, and you end up dying because you've taken a bad engage, where if you just waited a little bit to let your jungler get closer, or maybe you just waited for a health potion to really heal you up, you would have been in a better position and you'd have won the trade or even killed them. Now, this is something I'm definitely guilty of myself, and is the number 1 reason I get roasted when I play Sett, because I too feel just too obligated to go for every engage because it feels really good. So it's something that you've just got to be on top of yourself about and really be thinking, I can go in, but should I go in? Number 4 is vision control. Now, it's a bit more of a general statement, sure, but I think that it's really important, especially on a champion like Sett, to really maximize your vision control. If you're coming from a champion like Nami or Soraka or even Yumi, you probably have a hard time warding by yourself. You normally wait for your team, and if they don't come, you don't ward. Well, Sett's very different. He's a very safe champion, he's very intimidating, and he's very strong in the early game, which means getting those deep wards into the enemy jungle, be it a control ward or a vision ward, is really important to maximize your utility on Sett. Although it doesn't feel like it, especially in the lower elos, your team will be using this vision, and it can really help you to have that vision of the enemy jungler, or even just the enemy mid laner pathing it down for a gank, and this is something that is not to be underlooked on Sett. And this is something that is not to be overlooked on Sett. Number 5 is roaming, and roaming is a super complex thing on supports, and there's a lot to it. I think I'm going to be doing my own video just on roaming as a support, but I'm going to do a quick 4-step roaming for dummies on Sett guide. Step 1, have a plan. Never roam for no reason. Before you even leave your lane, you need to know where you're going, why you're going there, and what you're hoping to achieve. Step 2, opportunity cost. Understand what you're missing. It's okay to miss stuff, but understand how much XP you're going to be missing, what objectives you're making vulnerable by leaving, and whether or not your ADC needs you right now. Step 3, understand your limitations. Now this is really important, especially if you're coming from top lane. You need to understand that you're not a top laner, and you're not even a jungler. You're going to be very far behind the enemy mid laner on XP, and on money, and on items. This means that you need to understand that if you do go for a gank, he might be able to turn around and kill you both, especially if he's really far ahead. So you need to understand that you're playing like a support, not like a jungler, and not like a top laner. You're not going to be able to 1v1 him, and you may not even be able to 2v1 him if he's very far ahead. Step 4, and this is very important, be back before the wave crashes into your tower. As soon as that wave hits your tower, your ADC becomes super vulnerable. They're gonna try and tower dive him, no matter who they are, and even if they have no tower dive potential, like say a Yuumi, the jungler, the mid laner, and the top laner are all going to see your ADC alone under a tower, and maybe even behind, and they're going to think, right, that's a free kill. Maybe they're going to TP in, maybe they're going to run down for a gank if they're super mobile. Either way, they're looking at him as a really easy target. You need to be there to protect him, even if it's just with your presence. It's really going to help out having you there next to him and able to stop a tower dive. And the last thing I want to talk about is positioning for your R. Now again, this has a lot to it. There's a lot to do with who you're ulting, when you're ulting them, and where you're ulting them, but I'm going to give you a couple of little tips to really help you maximize the use of it. So firstly, about target choice. Now, let's say you want to ult the enemy support because they're engaging a lot and they're doing a lot of damage. You're going to want to obviously ult them away from your team. You don't want to ult them into your team because then you're just kind of doing their job for them, but also you want to ult them away at the right time. However, if the enemy has a very squishy AD carry that's doing very well, you're going to want to ult them into the team. AD carries live on range, so ulting them into your own team, despite the fact that you're losing the damage of your ult crashing into the ground, is a really good way to get that ADC killed. So that brings us on to the second tip. If you know where you're ulting them, or what direction you want to ult them in, you really need to think about your positioning. If you're trying to get an AD carry ulted into your team so that your melee carries can delete them safely, then you're going to want to get behind that AD carry. Of course, there are many ways to achieve this. The best way, in my opinion, is to set it up with your E. You stun the person that you're going to want to ult with your E, and then you position yourself while they're stunned, and then you ult them in the exact right direction. Of course, if you're using it for an engage, you can also position yourself with a good flank, or maybe even flash behind them to really take them off guard. And that's it. If you've made it all the way here, I hope you really have a good understanding of Sett support and why he works now. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. To catch what's up next on my League 101 series, make sure you subscribe. And if there's a champion or build that you want to see in the series, tell me down in the comments below.